Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello there. Dungeon Eternium by Dakota Krout, book 5 of the Divine Dungeon. And I believe this is the final book of the actual main series, the first started series that he wrote. He has done other series. I've reviewed one so far. I've done not, the most recent book hasn't come out yet, I don't think. But yeah, this is book 5 and the final book of the Divine Dungeon series. This book, okay, I actually enjoy the series. I have gone through it 4 times. This is my fourth time through it. So don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. However, I guess I've just read it too much where I've started to find more and more problems. Sure, they do kind of, it's done in a way to where it's acceptable. A lot of the things that are introduced that I have found issues with, he answers them in an acceptable way. The problem is, you know that he didn't plan it ahead of time. So in my mind, it's just like, I'll go with what you've given me, but so for instance, this one starts off where the world's coming to an end and they need to find refuge. So the whole thing is basically about building a portal to get into Cal's soul space. There is really not much of a story here because apparently he ended it in the previous book. So they added a ton of little caveats where the Wisp guides them to a location, the origin of all Wisps. Cal meets several other dungeons, which is strange because he introduced that his ley lines, and you have to be reading the book to understand what that is, his ley lines had already circled the entire globe, which means that they had already found every other facet, every other dungeon, which would have been eaten away at his energy. But no, they go to the barbarians location, the people's location, and find out that there's a dungeon there, which would have been eaten away at the ley lines. Not only that, is it would have torn down the barriers they had in place at that location. So already he's kind of gone against what he's already said. And he also makes it across the globe towards, I guess, Alaska? To where they have the Aurora Borealis. And literally, there's another dungeon there, a massive, powerful dungeon. So it's like all these little things, because they said previously that the ley lines had circled the entire globe and had now started to go inward towards the planet. They had started, I can't hold that against them because the story's still good. Mainly because of the characters Danny and Cal, the Dungeon and the Wisp. Their relationship is honestly a true relationship. The way I can relate to Cal immensely because the way it's written, it just feels like I have been in those situations, and it's rather humorous. I find it hilarious because it feels like a real relationship. I don't care for Dale as much. I don't care for really many of the other characters at all. They're just fun little caveats to watch, which I guess is what the purpose was, because we're basically taking the point of view of the dungeon throughout, which is why I found it so fascinating. This story really doesn't feel like, at least this book really doesn't feel like it does much. It's just so much exposition, so much, because I love how they introduce the fact that things are named spells. I love how the mana works. I love how the whole magic system works and how it has to be revamped over and over and over again as the dungeon figures things out. So we are learning with the dungeon. And I absolutely find that interesting. I really found it truly engaging because we are learning as this figment, this rock is, this dungeon is, this just amalgamation of data starts to accumulate and learn. We are learning with it, and I absolutely found that interesting. It's a good way of throwing exposition at people and have it not truly be exposition because, well, the main character itself is learning. So I think that's what I find so fascinating about it. It's the fact that it gets away with throwing information at us without it feeling like complete information. Because, well, the character needs to learn somehow, and we as readers need to learn somehow. So have us go through it together. Yeah, and it honestly, the perspective of Dale and the dungeon, it gives us two different caveats, so we learn how humans deal with it, and then we learn how dungeons deal with it. Because the dungeon basically deals with the magic in the world as it's in the world. Humans have to deal with it as it's in them, and how it's basically two different ways of looking at it. And I've actually found that interesting. But this book itself didn't feel like it did much. They go to the location A to free a people, and then they'll go to location B to free a dungeon to allow it to enter the soul space. Of course, they have the S rankers return, and I still have an issue with how the power system works, because they just make them way too powerful. There are a lot of things that I feel weren't ever explained upon, like the Silverwood tree. They should have. I still want to know more about that. The power system. What is the heavenly rank exactly? They never introduced anyone. They just touched on it. And honestly, that's why I feel like everything was a little, ugh. Yeah, because the Silverwood tree, they introduced like the wood elves finally. They introduced the plant. I guess they're going to introduce all that later on, as to why families would revolve around the plant, as to why, but I want it now. It's like, you can't feed me this information and not expect me to be annoyed that I haven't been taught it yet. I love to learn, and here I'm learning all this stuff about magic and fantasy in this world alone, and it stops. It stops. Like, they never tell us what the deal Eternium made with the dungeon. And that aggravates me. They always go over it. It's like the writer, Dakota Krout, hadn't even thought of it, and I'm like, you know what? We'll figure this out. And I guess it's in that other book series that he's co-authoring with someone else. But overall, don't listen to my complaining. It actually is a good series. It's just, I want to know more, and I hate it when they end it on such a note where it's not that. This is the problem. It's like, it isn't so good, like, oh, I didn't see it coming. It's more like, you couldn't think of another way to do this, that you had to end it like this? Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Toodles.